And good morning. It is Thursday, August 27th, 11 a.m. And here we are continuing our conversations with the candidates. And we are hitting up all the local rep and Senate seats that are up for primaries on September 8th. And joining me, as he normally does, is Mr. Frank Prosnitz. And good morning, Frank.
Good morning.
And let's get to the phase. Big issue here. Tell us about your hat.
Oh, it's a Paw Sox hat.
Oh, okay.
One of many Paw Sox hats. This is now a relic.
It is a relic.
History.
I would sell it, and perhaps we'll get some Paw Sox today if needed. Yes. So yesterday we did wrap up our Newport City Council candidates. We interviewed 18 out of 19. That means we spent at least 18 hours. 1 hour with each candidate over the last 10 days. And it was actually a lot of fun and we learned a lot. And yesterday afternoon, we kicked off our conversations with candidates who are seeking to, get in the House of Representatives in the General Assembly. And yesterday we were in District 74. Today we're in District 71. And tomorrow we'll be in District 72. You keep up with the numbers and try.
So that's a total of what, 120? Oh, never mind.
Yes, there are a lot of them. And joining us today is Mr. John Edwards, the fifth, in case the fourth is running anywhere. But John Edwards, he is. That's true, he is. But John, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Ryan and Frank. I appreciate the time.
Good to have you.
And, for John is currently on Tiverton Town Council, but what I'm going to let John do is tell everybody about your background and why you chose to run for this seat.
Sure. So, thanks for giving me some free time here to talk. So my background, I'm business development representative for a retirement plan record-keeping firm called PCS Retirement based in Philadelphia with offices in Tampa. I actually cover the Northeast for them, so all of New England and New York State. So I have a nice background in finance. As you mentioned, I am on the Tiverton Town Council. This is my second term on the Town Council over here in Tiverton. And believe it or not, I'm actually the only candidate in this race on either party side that has any experience in government. So hopefully that gives me a nice edge. Personally, I have a wife and one daughter, although we have number two that we're expecting. So it's actually going to be a girl as well. So I'm going to be fully outnumbered in my household, which is going to be fun. And I do have a lot of other experience in non-government space, serving on the board of directors for the Tiverton Wastewater District, and also for many years on the board of directors for the Newport County Chamber of Commerce, among other positions I've held. And I've been, privileged in the past to represent all the regional chambers on the Chamber Coalition Board, which was an entity where we lobbied on behalf of business, Up House, to make sure that the business climate in Rhode Island was a friendly one, which, as we all know, it's traditionally not been. So had a lot of experience in the space. I think I can bring all of that experience to bear up at the State House level. And the reason why I hopped into this race, quite frankly, I've always wanted to move up, and I think I can do a lot more good for Tiverton, Portsmouth, and Little Compton from this seat than I ever could on the Tiverton Town Council. Locally here in town, we face some significant headwinds, especially when it comes to the budget this year, as a result of the ongoing battle that we have with the state over the casino revenue guarantee number. And that's something that needs to be fixed by legislation, as an example. So, looking forward to closing out this campaign and hopefully getting up to the State House and getting some good work done on behalf of all the constituents in Portsmouth, Tiverton, and Little Compton.
And that's right. I didn't make it clear at the beginning, but 71 is Portsmouth, Tiverton, and Little Compton. And no matter what, District 71 will have somebody new representing them because incumbent Representative Rep Canario chose not to run for re-election. Quickly, talk about maybe your relationship with Rep Canario and, have you consulted him? Have you talked to him much? Have you worked with him much?
Yeah, I have, and actually, I've known Rep Canario, or Dennis as I call him, for many many years. He's been very close with my father, who is the rep in District 70, so half of Tiverton and another part of Portsmouth. So I've known Dennis for years. Going to various events. Talking with him up at the State House, and. When I found out he was going to retire, it was great to have him come out and publicly support me and endorse me for this race. I think Dennis did a phenomenal job up there in his 8 years at the State House, and I'd really like to continue the legacy that he started to make sure that we keep the state moving in the right direction.
And finally, for those that might see John, and he looks familiar, John did work in the hospitality industry down in Newport. And John did previously run for a position in Ward 3 on Newport City Council. So
I did.
If the name is familiar, that could be why as well.
Shopping around for towns that will accept you, huh, John?
No, so I grew up in Tiverton, Frank, and I met my wife down in Newport. Actually, when I was bartending down at the long since gone now Rhino Bar, which is now the Surf Club, and I have a number of friends that work there. But quite frankly, the real estate proposition in Newport, as we all know, is virtually unattainable for younger people to get into. So when my wife and I get married, we were lucky enough to find a house over here in Tiverton, move back home, be closer to my parents, which is great now that we have one young one and number two on the way. And so that's how we ended up out here. And quite frankly, it's a story that we're seeing a lot from people that I know from my days down in Newport, where they're starting to get married and have kids, and they're all buying houses, either out in North and South Kingston or over here in Tiverton or Little Compton, because the real estate is just unaffordable in Newport.
Yeah, we're hearing that story told time and again in terms of Newport. I don't know how that gets resolved. I'm going to ask you right off what we normally ask around the last question is, but you're looking to move on to the State House for the first time. What are your priorities when you get up there?
So, great question. I really look at it. It's 1A and 1B are the two, and they kind of go hand in hand. So, as you might know, the state right now for this year is facing a $600 million budget deficit. And to put that in perspective, that's pretty close to 10% of our total budget at the state level. Next year, it's already over $200 million. And that actually is a structural deficit that goes out, for decades. And so we need to make some major structural.
I want to hold you there for 1 second. Sure. I want to come back to that. For those people who don't understand it, could you explain a structural deficit, what that really means?
Yeah, so basically it's we're spending more than we're bringing in, and we have to close that gap. And it's something that we see over time as costs for things increase, due to inflation. The state's not keeping pace with our revenues, and there's a number of areas where we need to shore up the budget.
I interrupted you in the middle of your talking about the deficit and your priorities.
Sure. So to get back to that, $200 million deficit next year that goes out for many, many years. We need major structural changes in the way that we budget in the state. And what goes hand in hand with that, in my opinion, is how we approach the revenue line item, right? So traditionally, Rhode Island as a state has relied heavily on sin taxes as a way to fund our budget. And that's quite frankly not a method for us to go forward in a positive manner. So, locally here over on the other side of the river, in Tiverton, we have the casino. Rhode Island relies heavily on the lottery for funding the budget. But things like, tax on alcohol, tax on tobacco, that's really those are ways for us to target the population in the state that's most in need of our help, and essentially take money right out of their pockets, right, by hitting them with the sin taxes. So my vision and what I would like to see happen here is for us to follow some of the positive models that the state's already taken in. So I'll use a perfect example here is Fidelity Investments and Citizens Bank. We as a state were able to go and essentially undercut Massachusetts on the tax deal with Fidelity. Fidelity lifted and shifted their operations down here to Smithfield, Rhode Island, and the state had a huge windfall in the form of tax revenue. Not to mention, it brought a number of significant well-paying jobs to the state. And so, we're now in a position where you can't, walk 4 feet without bumping into somebody that works for Fidelity or for Citizens. And we need to continue that trend. So, where I see the state has failed a little bit is that we didn't continue along looking at for companies that look, feel, smell just like Fidelity. So if we look to our north, there's a number, as an example, John Hancock, State Street Bank, Putnam Empower, they're giant. They're hiring like it's going out of style. MFS. If we look to Connecticut, you've got, the Hartford, you've got Prudential, Sun Life's also up in Massachusetts, and we should be looking right now as an opportunity for us to go and lure those businesses down here to Rhode Island. And quite frankly, we should be luring them down here to the East Bay. So, part of, what I want to see accomplished here is for us to actually get the Navy to relinquish some of the Navy lands on the west side of Portsmouth, where they had the tank farms. And with all the contamination that's in the soil down there, you could never put housing there, and if you were, all you have to do is look at Bay Street and Tiverton for what will happen. Higher rates of cancer, people wouldn't be able to go out in their backyards. You wouldn't be able to have home-based businesses like daycares because of all the contamination that's in the ground. So it's a perfect opportunity for us to marry, preserving the environment, saving the environment with increasing revenue for the state, because those lands would be perfect for instance, Class A office space. And when you stick a building there, and more importantly, the big parking lots that go along with them, what you're doing is essentially capping that area so that water, rainwater can't penetrate the ground, pick up those bad PFAS chemicals and bring them out into, into Melville Pond and out into the bay. Tiverton also has a very large, piece of property with the industrial park that has gone undeveloped since pretty much the town took it over. So there's another opportunity for us to move a company down here. And quite frankly, I think the East Bay has a ton to offer. It's really the crown jewel in the state. And the state should pay a lot more attention to us, rather than just take all of the dollars out of Newport County from the tourism industry.
John, I'm going to jump on a couple of things because you raised so many questions on the. And I'll rattle them off, and then we can tackle them one at a time.
Sure.
You mentioned sin taxes. Curious about your position on legalizing marijuana. I also am. You mentioned luring companies to Rhode Island, and the Commerce Department has relied upon tax incentives as a way to encourage companies to come here. Whether or not you encourage that, if they can do that or expand that. You also mentioned contaminated land, and curious about whether you think we need to expand our brownfields legislation in any order.
All right, guys, I'll see you later.
And that's our hour. No. So I'll start with the Commerce Department, since it follows the thread of what I was just talking about. I mean, listen, I'm a big carrot, not a stick kind of guy, right? So I believe that, if we're going to make a positive impact and lure organizations here, there needs to be a carrot attached to that. And it's a great way, by the way, for us to insert some other, saving the environment propositions as well, when you bring these organizations down here. So, and I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, but I think the Commerce Department should absolutely leverage tax incentives, because that's what moves business, right? The Fidelity Investments, if they did not have the tax deal that they do, they would not have picked, little old Rhode Island to move their operations to. We saw what happened when we changed the taxation rules and how it impacted, say, for instance, MetLife. MetLife did as best as they could to lift and shift all of those jobs down to the Carolinas in an effort to avoid paying taxes. I look at what Rhode Island is size-wise, and we're very comparable to, say, Delaware. And Delaware has a ton of businesses down there. They are not facing the same budget problems that we are because of all the business that they have down in Delaware. Rhode Island should be in the same position. It's really the only way for us to move forward. We cannot simply rely on income taxes and taxing the population to death. So I'll pause there. What was
Delaware has all those corporations because they have favorable rules and regulations relative to companies incorporating. So they have an awful lot of corporate headquarters in Delaware, far more than its size would warrant.
Correct. And, I think that, we look at our neighbor Massachusetts, right? Their big thing was, biotech. They decided that's what they wanted to do, and they went after it, and they, created regulations, around the industry to incentivize companies to relocate and to start up there. We should be doing the same thing, I think, in the finance industry, because we have two major anchor businesses here already in Fidelity and Citizens.
So
next up was.
Yeah, I want to get to the marijuana. I don't want to lose that one because your father was instrumental,
Yes.
one of those people instrumental in passing legislation that decriminalized small possession of small amounts of marijuana.
Correct. Yeah, and listen, I don't want to speak for my father, but part of the reason why we did that, and I don't know if you remember the first quote when the paper asked him, "Well, why'd you do it?" And he said, "Look at Massachusetts; they didn't implode." And I think that that's the same position that we would be in if we're talking about legalizing here as well. We have a decade so far of history where everybody was worried that the federal government was going to come down and bring the hammer on Colorado, and it's actually worked out pretty well for Colorado. I think that we're, as a nation, moving closer and closer to full legalization of marijuana. Especially when you look at what the state of our national deficit, and I think that if the federal government's going to do it, we don't want to be the last to the table. We don't want to be the last one to show up to the party. I think now is a great time to have that conversation, especially in light of how well Massachusetts has done. Right here on the border in Tiverton, there is a big shop, and if you drive by on a Friday or a Saturday, I mean, the line, the cars back up all the way up to Route 24 to the highway, and it's booming. So we look at that; it's just over the line for us. I mean, the state should be looking at that the same way. So again, if Massachusetts didn't destroy itself, Rhode Island certainly wouldn't, either. As long as we keep, some of the mayors and these cities and towns from getting backdoor deals like what happened in Fall River.
And then Frank, I think your last one was brownfields. What was your
Brownfields. So the idea of brownfields, of course, is you're talking about building upon contaminated land. And one of those, and I think a very successful program in Rhode Island, has been the brownfields programs that allow us to reclaim some of that property. Do you favor an expansion of that program to be able to go in and reclaim even more of that? Because it sounds like that would be necessary for anything that would develop on those lands.
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely, right. And we're going to have to work hand in hand with the EPA in order to get that done. Luckily, because I've been around and involved in state and local governments since going all the way back to like 2004, when my father first ran. I built up a number of relationships. So for instance, Congressman Cicilline, Senator Reed, Senator Whitehouse. I'm close with them, and I think that leveraging those relationships could help us bring the EPA to bear. In fact, Jack Reed's office was instrumental in helping us over here in Tiverton on the wastewater board expand our funding sources so we could get a shovel in the ground and actually get that project up and rolling. But yes, I mean, I think it's certainly something we should look at. There's really, in this life, there's really only two things you can't make more of, and that's time and land. So if we have existing land and it is contaminated, we should be doing everything in our power to clean that up and repurpose that land, especially in a state as small as Rhode
Island. John, Tiverton, Little Compton, Portsmouth, certainly 3 different communities. I'm sure they have a lot of the same issues, needs, opportunities. Are there do the communities differ in any way in differing needs and different opportunities and different issues?
Well, I mean, absolutely. So, just if you look at the profile of all 3 communities, I would say that the south end of Tiverton is probably closer to Little Compton, just obviously differing in property tax rates than it would be to Portsmouth. I think, the area in which the District 71 is located in Portsmouth is certainly more suburban versus rural. And so there's obviously challenges that come around when you're dealing with suburban communities versus more of a rural environment. Everything south of Booger Marsh Road here in Tiverton is basically R80 or above zoning. So you have significantly less density than you do in Portsmouth. Density, from a state perspective, and as we, relate to zoning, is certainly a consideration. Because again, I mentioned you can't really make more land, so you have to look at the varying densities across the state if we are to relocate more businesses to the state, because with businesses comes employees, and employees need a place to live. So I would very much be opposed to expanding densities in, say, Little Compton, because I think the rural character of the town what draws people to live there. Same thing with the south end of Tiverton. Although I think we have some opportunities in and around Booger Marsh and some of the Crandall Road areas where there are some commercial properties already developed. So there's some opportunities for the municipalities to look at mixed use zoning where you've got commercial and residential together, and that's actually something that we've done here in Tiverton. By trying to implement the form-based code. It's not codified yet. It's been a battle, but we are working to get there.
John, when you mentioned the casino earlier, you've now had a little bit of experience with that. Are you as a council at this point satisfied that the casino is a positive development for Tiverton? And secondly, once at the State House, what would you look to change relative to the financing?
So great question. So I think early on the casino looked like it was. Oh.
No, I was saying Frank's got one good question. That was it.
One good, yeah. Once a week. That's all right.
So I think early on and through the middle of last year, we're talking fiscal years, by the way, not calendar years, but early on through the first semi full fiscal year it was open. I think it was positive. The town generated some great revenue off of the property. The same goes through for this past fiscal year. For the first 3 quarters, I think it was like 2.25 million that came in. The issue that I found with the casino, I don't think it's caused a ton of problems locally, in terms of traffic or, bringing a negative population into the town. I mean, if we look at, the police reports, I mean, the most that ever happens over there is, somebody has to go and be removed from the casino for some, minor reason, right? It's not bringing in, theft and, prostitution and drug deals and all this other stuff that we were warned about by some members of the population early on. But I think one of the problems is the way that the guarantee was written and structured. It basically set it up in the legislation so that if, let's say, they closed because we had a big blizzard come through and they weren't open one day, the state would revoke that guarantee. And what we've seen from volume with that casino is there's probably not a chance for us based off of our straight take in Tiverton for us to ever realize the full $3 million. So I think the solution, in my opinion, is pretty straightforward. The guarantee should be prorated based off of, the number of days open. That I think would solve a lot of problems and people would be amenable to. But it's very clear that it's a source of revenue that should never have been counted on for our operational budget. I remember, 4 years ago talking with Ryan on his radio program about how it shouldn't be put into operations. Lincoln was very clear when they came down. We talked to Jim Wallman several times, and he said, whatever you do, don't put it into operations. And lo and behold, we had a segment of the population that, got 50 signatures put in the budget. And here we are with it stuck in operations. And when the $3 million, vanishes overnight, that causes significant pain for our municipal budget. So, to put it in perspective, we were tasked as a council with finding essentially $1.3 million to cut in order to meet the cap, the 4% cap on tax increases because we couldn't count on that casino revenue. And we were able to come up with $750,000 of it. And, we were still $500,000 short. So luckily we gave some good suggestions to the budget committee, but it's going to result in this year where Tiverton's not going to be paving roads, but for whatever's left over in the general fund, that 25% that rolls forward, we're not going to be buying, equipment that we need. So, we've had an equipment replacement plan with the police department where we've every year we try and buy a squad car to make sure we stay up on having the new equipment. That's not going to happen this year. The same goes with our DPW department. They're desperately in need of some stuff. We need plows, we need dump trucks, we need dump bodies. We need to make sure that we have money set aside to repair our bulldozer, and none of that's going to happen here either. I mean, we've for instance, we've needed in Tiverton a skid steer for, I don't know, the last 15 years and we still don't have one. So, things like that are just going to get pushed off into the future. And then, the OPEB contribution was eliminated from the budget as well. And, all we're doing is, pushing a significant liability and kicking the can further down the road. But that's what we were stuck with because we didn't treat the revenue correctly.
What was the formula for the guarantee up until now?
So the formula is if the casino's open 24/7 for a full fiscal year, the state will pay at minimum $3 million, regardless of our take. So let's say the straight line percentages that the town receives from the table games and then the slots, and obviously it's two different percentages because they're different operations there. But let's say we brought in $2 million in revenue in 1 year, the state would make up the $1 million difference to $3 million. And by the way, that guarantee was only good for 10 years. So the town was going to run into this issue by putting $3 million in the budget. Anyways, it just was accelerated to essentially year one because of the coronavirus crisis.
Right.
All right. Let's turn gears a little bit and let's get your thoughts on, small businesses. Many small businesses are struggling because of COVID-19. We're still calling it, we're in the midst of COVID-19. And we're looking for my question here. What are some of the things that we can do to improve the state's economic recovery for small businesses during and after the pandemic?
So that's a great question as well. Wait,
hold it. One you got this week.
So the lieutenant governor has actually got a proposition, and I'm sure you've seen he's been essentially at war with the governor. Other states have begun releasing some of the coronavirus relief funds that came in and using those to shore up our small businesses. I think Rhode Island should do exactly the same. We wouldn't be first in the nation to move forward with this, but we definitely should not be last. And I think that that's one area where we can help support our small businesses with funds that, quite frankly, state's not even going to be able to use because of the way the legislation was written down in DC. So, we brought in $1.2 billion. I think that was the minimum amount that each state could receive. And, even when we get through all of this, it's still, we still have a huge pot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars left over that we haven't been able to use. So I think that we should begin dispersing those to small businesses to help shore them up so that we don't lose the existing businesses we have in the state. And it should be across the board on all businesses. So not just retail, not just hospitality, but we should look at other areas where they're feeling the pain as well. So for instance, agriculture. Agriculture is big down here in South Tiverton and Little Compton. That's an area where, we should be out supporting our farmers. And we have the funds available to do so. We just have to release them.
I want to stand off just a bit because I want to go back in terms of the legislature's involvement through this whole period. That the legislature seems to have played virtually no role in the state's efforts to mitigate the coronavirus. We see the governor and the Department of Health and the and RIDE, but the legislature seems to be nowhere to be seen.
So you're going to see the legislature soon. Obviously, the finances in the state are controlled through the House of Representatives, so they will have to play a part. But the reason why we haven't seen direct involvement from the state legislature is because when the governor declares a state of emergency, all the power flows through the governor's office. So, and that's written into our Constitution. So if the state legislature even wanted to do something and step in and take a greater role, essentially you'd have to call a vote to revoke the governor's authority under the state of emergency. That's just the way it is. So I guess in that regard, I'm comfortable with it because it follows the Constitution and we haven't had, lawsuits or legal challenges as a result of it. But as I mentioned, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, as I mentioned, it's really the governor's show at this point until the state of emergency is rolled back. But you will see the House get involved.
Overall, John, are you supportive of the governor's show, her orders, mask wearing, physical distance, size of gatherings, all related to COVID-19?
So yes, it's funny when this thing first started. I think a lot of people in the state looked at it and said, "Wow, what an overreaction!" And hindsight being 2020, the governor couldn't have gotten it more right. I think that the stay-at-home orders worked. Obviously we've seen in the number of coronavirus cases. Rhode Island's been relatively small. We've seen a decline. It seems like the mask wearing, the social distancing, all of that is working. We just need to stick to it until God willing, we have a company come up with a vaccine, like Regeneron, Moderna, Pfizer, one of those companies.
We are as we continue to shift gears here, I'm going to talk about cars.
Sure.
I'm going to talk about the car tax. We are in is it the third year,
Yep.
I believe, of the speaker's program to eliminate the car tax. Are you supportive of that program, and are you comfortable that that the state is going to be able to continue to reimburse communities for their lost revenue because that car tax goes directly to the municipalities?
It does, and listen, some municipalities. I'll use Tiverton as an example because I'm intimately familiar with the budget. Tiverton as an example. Our car tax, rate is actually less than. It's less than what the cap is, and I think it's going to be less than what the cap is until year 5. Places like Tiverton, Little Compton, like we're in a good position here with the car tax. Upstate is really where they feel the pain significantly. Places like Providence where they rely heavily on this. I think personally, it makes a ton of sense to get rid of it. I'll use a personal example. Obviously, as I mentioned, I have number 2 on the way. We have to get my wife a different vehicle. And it's staggering to me just how much the car tax impacts the middle class. We look at Ford Explorer as an example. Ford's got a lease rate now for $259 a month. Add in the excise tax and the sales tax to that, and you're up to $440 a month, which is a huge difference. And that's something that directly impacts all of the working class families here in Rhode Island. So I would love to see this car tax fully repealed. It's actually been one of my key talking points that I want to make sure it goes away entirely. And so, we have to make sure that gets done. The worst thing, in my opinion, would be us kicking the can or extending the time frame out on this. It would certainly create a sense of distrust with the legislature if they were to allow that to happen.
Frank, I'm going to let you do affordable housing here because I feel like it's a good segue.
Well, it surely is, and you mentioned it in terms of Newport. Interestingly, Newport meets the state's threshold for affordable housing at 10%. But it's clear that most communities do not. And there was a legislative commission 2 or 3 years ago that I think came out of the House that was taking a look at it. And I think the most significant change they came up with was to extend the commission. What can be done about affordable housing? How do we make it better for not only people of the middle class, but people who are on the fringe in being able to afford decent housing?
So, Frank, I'll give you a great question again.
Come on, Ryan, too.
Listen, affordable housing is a huge crisis in the state, right? We've got a serious problem here, and I can tell you, what I've seen firsthand being on the council is part of the problem that we have with municipalities meeting the affordable housing piece is that it's oftentimes just overlooked. So, when this topic typically comes up is when communities revise their comprehensive community plan. And I can tell you that the state planning has essentially gathered up every single licensed planner that there is available, and they employ all of them. And that leaves the pool of planners available to the municipalities significantly smaller. So municipalities don't have, especially the smaller ones like, Portsmouth, Tiverton, Little Compton, don't have the resources to be able to adequately address these in the time required by the state to revise your comprehensive community plan. So, I think step one would be to initiate a program where statewide planning actually lends out some of their qualified planners to the municipalities when they go through this exercise to make sure that things like affordable housing don't fall by the wayside. It's certainly an area where the municipalities need to focus more, but other parts that impact our affordable housing is when you have developers that come in, they really have been given a couple different options by the state. Let's say somebody wants to build 10 houses, and part of that means I have to build one house as an affordable that falls under the criteria for affordable housing. Well, the developer actually has the ability to just write a check to the municipality and circumvent that. And so I think that should be an option that we take away, especially when you see some of the developments that are proposed. Here, again, I'll mention Tiverton again, but North Tiverton on the other side of Sousa Road, there's 270 or 280 houses planned. There's an expansion of housing that's going on down in the villages, and the developers should not be allowed to skirt these requirements simply by writing a check, and making themselves essentially more profitable by doing so. So we need to make sure that the rules and regulations are followed, and they're followed so that the housing is actually built and provided. So that's certainly a big component in an area that I would like to focus on.
John, a quick follow-up to that, and I'm not even sure when the developer writes that check, where does that money go?
So the municipality takes it. It typically goes into like a community development block grant, or in Tiverton, I think we send it to church community housing, so that they can make use of it. But the reality is, with the cost of materials, the cost of labor, the cost of permitting, church community housing isn't going to be able to take, say, $65,000 and build a house for it. So, it really ultimately it just goes into maintaining some of the properties that we have existing, and it doesn't result in newly created affordable housing. And I do want to mention one other component, because there are in Tiverton and Portsmouth, especially in District 71, there are a number of mobile home parks. And the way that the municipalities treat and tax these, I think, needs to be changed as well. So with mobile homes, there's actually, I think, one bank in the country that will allow you to apply for a loan to purchase one. And there's no bank in the country that will lend you any money to make home improvements. The homes themselves sit on land that the people who own the mobile home don't actually own. They pay a rent to. It's essentially a leased land proposition. And what you have is municipalities treating and taxing these mobile homes as though they're single family homes, but they're clearly not. And so I look at it from the perspective of, how do we make sure that we protect the most vulnerable in our community, especially when it comes to affordable housing? The state should step in and disallow municipalities from taxing mobile homes as though they're single family homes. Instead, they should be taxed more like a car, oddly enough, but at a different rates, significantly different rates, where there is depreciation involved, because that's what happens. The mobile homes do depreciate over time, and it's not like a single family home where they tend to increase in value over time.
I'm going to stay there. There was a lot of attractive and affordable and live and families and all of that stuff. So I'm going to go with this one. How do you make your district, Rhode Island, a more attractive and affordable place to live for families, for seniors, for all?
So, I think there's a number of ways that we do it, right? And they all tie together. So it's employment opportunities, like we talked about earlier on, making sure that we're bringing in good paying jobs into the state. It's making sure that we have affordable housing that's actually built, not just a check and skirt the rules scenario. And it's making sure that we're not, taxing these families and our seniors into oblivion. When we talked about early on the budget hole, my biggest fear is that the state turns around and looks at all of us as residents as a way to raise revenue and plug that gap. Honestly, the taxes in the Northeast are significantly higher than anywhere else in the country. Maybe not as high as California, but outside of California, we pay a significant amount of money in taxes up here. And it's great because it's a beautiful place to live. We all want to live here. But what we're doing when we layer in all these taxes on our residents and our taxpayers is we're essentially pushing out the middle class, right? You're creating this huge disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and it's really the government that's helping to create that. So, we need to make sure that we're controlling the taxes which were imposed, especially on the middle class. We need to make sure that we have access to good jobs, and we need to make sure that we have plentiful, affordable housing so that people can actually live here. And be able to go out and have participate in activities and enjoy the community.
John, I wanted to switch gears, or maybe not so much switch gears, to the racial divide in this country, and a racial divide that we perhaps have in Rhode Island, and it's all based upon housing, healthcare, safe neighborhoods, education, jobs, job training, all of those things. How do we have a real divide in one element, one political party that sees fear in white neighborhoods, and we have another group of people, as expressed by some NBA players most recently, of fear of discrimination against a particular ethnicity. What's our situation in Rhode Island? How can the legislature play a role in improving race relations?
So listen, we down here in the East Bay.
Wasn't that a great question again?
I don't want to overuse it, I don't want to build your confidence. Ryan texted me, he said, don't tell Frank great question too many times. No, I mean, so listen, we, down here in the East Bay, especially in Tiverton and Compton, the racial divide is not as evident, right? But it still exists, and there certainly still is a difference between people of color versus white people, and just in the way that they're treated. So, one of my colleagues and actually the president of the board for Tiverton Wastewater District, Leroy Kendricks, he and I had a lengthy conversation. I've actually helped facilitate a conversation between him and the chief of police here. But, he's somebody where you would never think that the color of his skin would, be a driver for discrimination. And yet he's had a number of stories where he's been pulled over, in this town, and for no other reason other than, he has a different color skin. So, that's something that we need to be honest and open about, and we need to make sure that we're having conversations about, and that, when we're talking about, how we're approaching this with our law enforcement officers, making sure that, they get the appropriate training needed. So, that's certainly one area that we can step in. I think, when we look at the more densely populated spaces, there have been some great programs that have actually worked. Things like body cameras. Here in Tiverton, we've got a pilot program going on, and I know the initial fear was, the officers aren't going to like it, but as it turns out, they're okay with it. So, making sure that we've got, those type of solutions, implemented, not just up in Providence, but, down here in the East Bay as well. And finding ways that the state can help support, municipalities, because again, every municipality's budget is strapped right now. So, I think that those are the being open and honest and having an actual conversation about it will help us, understand, the differences and where we can make some improvements, and making sure that every member of the community is involved. But, I think about the other thing is, the Black Lives Matter movement. I know that there are some people in this country who, are don't take kindly to the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and in reality, it's not about raising one group of people above everybody else. It's about making sure that we're all on equal footing. I think of that story from the Bible where the one sheep leaves the herd, and the shepherd goes to chase after the one sheep, and one of the 99 that's left behind says, well, what about us? And he says, you're okay, you don't need my help. So that's the same scenario I think that we're in now. And we need to make sure that the people that need it most are the ones who are getting the assistance.
John, obviously Portsmouth, Tiverton, Little Compton, right there on the water. I'm not too familiar, but you probably are more familiar being on Tiverton Town Council right now. But climate change is obviously playing a big part of everywhere. But what impact is it having? What can be done for District 71? So
down here in District 71, I mean, listen, I live the fear of rising sea levels every day. My house abuts the Sepauwett Marsh. I mean, if we have a nominal increase in sea levels, that's coming into my backyard. So it is something that we need to be aware of, but there's economic reasons why we want to be aware of it as well. So the coastline in Rhode Island is probably our most valuable asset, and it's one which in certain areas, especially in Tiverton, is incredibly underdeveloped. So we need to be taking every step that we can to make sure we're minimizing our impact. I know one way to do that would be to look at the renewable tax credits and making sure that those stay in place. I, again, as my own personal example, I actually looked at doing solar panels on my house, but because the pitch of the roof was wrong and the way it faced was incorrect, net metering was a solution that was out the door. And quite honestly, to put solar panels on my house would have resulted in a significant cost increase over just buying electricity straight from the grid. So we need to make sure that the tax credits are there to incentivize people to actually convert to renewable sources of energy, so that it's economically viable for them. I will tell you, I've heard my opponent has said that she wants to go out and buy electric vehicles for everybody in the state, and I think that that's an admirable position to take. But the problem is, without the infrastructure to support that, we're never going to move the needle forward. So, Rhode Island as a whole, we have very few electric vehicle charging stations available. And I think that, the way that we move this forward and we make, things like electric vehicles more commonplace, so we're lessening our impact on the environment, is to, tie incentives to organizations that move to the state. So, make those tax credits that we're going to use, to steal, Putnam Empower or, John Hancock or State Street from Massachusetts, make it so that when they come in and they build their new office space, they have to have X number of electric vehicle charging stations there. We have to build out that infrastructure before, we can go out and fully convert over to, electric vehicles as an example. The other piece that I think is worth mentioning is the economics around, creating wind turbines and using wind energy. So some of the neighborhoods, Portsmouth in particular, the neighbors are not exactly thrilled with that monstrosity of a wind turbine that's in their backyard. And going door to door and talking to those residents, I mean, you can hear it, even on a marginally breezy day. It really negatively impacts, the ability for those residents to enjoy their backyard. So, finding places that we can place them, like for instance, the Block Island Sound wind farm, I think that's a good, good location for it where it's out of the way. But, we can't be sticking these things in residential neighborhoods and negatively impacting people's quality of life. And the final piece that I would mention is that, we have a very, very good cyclical industry here in the East Bay in particular with our boat builders. But I think we have an opportunity to leverage the skills that the people in the boat industry trades have when it comes to fiberglass and building. And we can make Rhode Island, the capital of the country for where we create wind turbines, because the primary ingredient is fiberglass into those things. So why would we not want to provide some some retraining programs and some incentives to drive that industry forward, where we already have a huge base of exceptionally skilled workers in the state.
John, I only have one. We've covered an awful lot of territory this morning, and certainly want to give you an opportunity to speak to anything else. I have one last question, and I don't know what Ryan has on his plate. Your father enjoys the position of House Majority Whip. And so which puts him supportive, I would assume, and I'm making an assumption, of Speaker Mattiello. I wanted to find out your position. Are you a supporter of the Speaker?
And if I could follow up on that 1 second, John.
Sure.
What do you say to people that worry that you're just going to get up there and vote the way of the Speaker on every vote?
So listen, that's been one of the biggest questions I've received, while out talking to residents, right? And I understand people's reticence to get behind the Speaker and the Speaker Mattiello, but I will tell you that we've seen the Rhode Island Freedom Caucus. They've been vocal opponents of the Speaker. I believe the Rhode Island Democratic Women's Caucus, they've been vocal opponents of the Speaker. The problem is they don't put anybody up. So while we have this opposition to the Speaker, nobody else seems to want to step forward and actually carry the mantle. So if somebody else were to come forward and say that they desire to be Speaker, I'd absolutely give that person a look. But short of that, who else is there, right? There is nobody else who wants to be Speaker in the state of Rhode Island, at least that I've seen. So I think it's unfair to characterize, the Speaker as this, big evil boogeyman person. But the other thing I would mention to you too is that, yes, my father's in leadership. Yes, he's the House Majority Whip. Yes, he's on the Speaker's leadership team, but that doesn't mean that my vote is for sale. I have a proven track record here in Tiverton of doing what's in the best interest of my constituents, and that's something that I'm going to carry forward to the State House. And all anybody has to do is look at my record on the council to know that. So the other thing I would tell you is that if I was solely in the Speaker's pocket, so to speak, I wouldn't be party to a lawsuit against the state right now over the casino gaming revenue. So there's a number. And again, I understand that that people don't like the Speaker, but the last piece I would tell you is that generally up at the State House, the Speaker is the one who moves business forward. And so it puts people in this quandary. If you're an opponent of the Speaker and you get up to the State House and you can't get anything done, you can't get any bills for your constituents, and any bill that, you put your name on winds up not going anywhere. Well, you're not going to be up there for very long. So, it's interesting, when I hear people who don't like the Speaker of the House, the reality is, if you want to get something done and you want to actually move the needle forward, you have to work with others. And That's a position that I've always had, where I've always worked with, the opposing party, people of opposing viewpoints. Again, I would direct people back to my record on the council. More recently, I actually crossed the line and worked, as the only Democratic member of the Tiverton Town Council, worked with 2 other Republicans on the council, ardent people who have pretty much opposed me on everything, to move forward with a resolution looking for relief on our landfill. I will work with anybody, because that's what it's all about. When you get up to the State House, it's about working together to find solutions, and to move the needle forward for all of Rhode Island, and more importantly for your constituents. And the only way to do that is to be open-minded and talk to everybody.
I think I'm good, Brian. And John, you have anything else that you think?
I do.
is important?
I do. John, September 8th, you have a Democratic primary. It'll be you versus Michelle, and whoever wins that will go on to face off against a Republican. Am I right that there's also an independent?
There is, yes.
Okay.
I've never met the guy, oddly enough, but it's interesting. I mean, listen, I'll never begrudge anybody for coming forward and wanting to run for public office and to serve. And really, it is about service, right? This is not a career path. Certainly not with what what the stipend is for being in the General Assembly. Is this a potential career path for anybody? It's about service and service to your community. And so, I can never fault anybody who wants to run for office and to serve. So long as, they understand that it is about service and service first, and making sure you're looking out for your constituents.
So my question would be, is when people go and vote in the Democratic primary, what should they know is the biggest difference between you and your opponent that you see?
So there's 2 big differences. Number one is my experience. As I mentioned at the onset, I am the only candidate from either party in this race that has any experience whatsoever. And with the scope and size of the budget crisis that we face, and the revenue that we need to create at the State House for Rhode Island, we cannot send somebody up there who's inexperienced. I mean, we've seen what happens when you send somebody up who's inexperienced, not just here at a local level, but on the national level. Right, it creates chaos and it creates more crisis. So, we need to make sure that the next rep for District 71 is somebody who has experience and who has deep ties to the district. I've mentioned this to a lot of people in Portsmouth, because I think it matters. Me being from Tiverton, I'm certainly not going to overlook Portsmouth, because my grandmother, my aunt and uncle, and all my cousins live over there in the district. And my grandmother's never going to let me forget that. So. So there is that. And then down here in Tiverton, I mean, where I live in Tiverton, we're so close to Little Compton. I mean, it feels like we're basically in Little Compton. The only difference is the property tax rate, right? So we need somebody who's gonna have deep ties to the district, who's gonna have to all the towns in the district, and who's gonna work very, very hard on behalf of their constituents. And I have the proven track record to do so. The other component, I think, and I've heard this a lot on the campaign trail as well, is we need to get some new blood, some younger blood up there at the State House. And I think that when we talk about creating a new economy for the state of Rhode Island, it needs to be somebody with new ideas, and somebody who represents a younger constituency, because that's the future. That's the future of our state. We talk about, and we didn't even touch on education, which is a huge pillar of mine. But we talk about what is the future of Rhode Island look like, and how do we bring those companies in here? And so I think that we should be looking for somebody who has that ability to create generational change, and I would be that candidate.
John, you mentioned education. Let's touch on education.
Let's do it.
Tell us about what your concerns are and what you would do about it.
Yeah, so I think I do. So my biggest concern, and again, it all ties back to the budget, but my biggest concern is, when we look at the state of our education, we want to make sure that we're bringing in things like universal pre-K. I think that's a huge component to expanding educational opportunities for all of Rhode Island. The other thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we're funding our education system appropriately. So one of the big knocks on the whole PPP program and the CARES Act is that you have certain charter schools that rely on state funding that were able to receive significant dollars from the federal government. The public education system did not. And I think when we look at, how do we, solve some of this budget crisis, we need to do dollar for dollar offsets on CARES money that went to fund those organizations. so that we have an equal playing field. And then most importantly, we need to make sure that the stream of revenue of state aid to the municipalities is predictable. We've seen here locally in Tiverton, when we have an idea what the state budget's going to be, what the state aid's going to be, we go out, we pass a budget, and if the number differs, let's say it goes down, well, that comes directly out of the municipal side. So if we expect in Tiverton $12 million and we pass our budget, with that money baked into the budget, we have to, if we don't get it, then it's coming out of the municipal side. And there was actually a court case where the Rhode Island Town Council looked for relief, and the judge actually said, you put it in the budget, you have to fund the education piece, and if you don't have the money, go have a bake sale. That was in the judge's actual thing. So we need to make sure that the revenue stream to municipalities to support education is predictable, so that you don't wind up sacrificing things on the municipal side, which are desperately needed in order to cover shortfalls that come from the state.
And that's his thoughts on education. John, was there anything else that is top of issue, top of mind, top of concerns or needs of your district that we did not touch on that you want to touch on now?
Oh God, there's so many. Do we have another hour?
Well, it'd be great, John. How about how people can get in touch with you?
Oh, great question. So my website.
Yeah, well, Ryan, three.
So my I can be reached. I have a website. It's Edwards471. So EDWARDSFOR71.com. They can also, this is probably going to regret this, but I'll put it out there. It's on all my campaign literature. They can call my cell phone, 401-862-3753. I'm readily available. I'm accessible. My phone's on me all the time. If people have an issue, if people have a question, I would encourage them to reach out. And then finally, my email address is johnjohn@edwards471.com. I do have a Facebook page and all that. It's linked on my website. So I would go to the website first and you can get to everything else.
John, you have campaigned during non-COVID times for seats such as on town council and for other seats you've run for. You've been out campaigning, going door to door during COVID times. What's it been like?
So oddly enough, the response has been very good. I think it changes your approach a little bit, right? Because obviously when you go knock on doors, it's, making sure you're that CDC, recommended 14 feet away. If you're not going to pull the mask up, I always, by the way, campaign with a mask, so that, we have that there. And, a lot of times people will come to the door and they lower the screen door and we kind of, talk at a distance, which is great. And, all my campaign, door hangers, they're actually designed so that you can hang them on a doorknob, knock, and then step back. And when people come to the door, we can have a conversation. So the only difference really between this and my last couple of council campaigns is the abbreviated timeline. So, the one thing that really disappoints me about, a primary election is that I'm not going to be able to get out and speak to every single constituent. I love having those conversations. I love talking to people. I love hearing what their issues are and, explaining that, we have a path forward and, hopefully they will support me. So to anybody who's watching, I humbly ask for your vote and, I look forward to representing you, from Tiverton, Portsmouth, and Little Compton up at the State House.
Excellent, and that's a good place to end. John, we wish you the very best of luck. Again, vote. Primary is coming up on September 8th. Many people have already gotten their mail ballots. They're already sending them back in. Early voting is available at every single city and town hall in the state. If you are registered to vote, you can go right now. They're allowing one person in at a time pretty much. Or you can go vote on September 8th. And we encourage everybody in Rhode Island, everybody in the United States, go vote, make your voice heard, and you can get it done. Frank, you got anything else?
I don't. I want to thank you, John. This is what I really like about these things is the number of issues that we're able to cover as we go through each of these video conferences, if you will, with each of the candidates. We learn more and more, and we learn more about different ways to approach different issues. And I appreciate your breadth of knowledge on a lot of these things, and wish you luck.
Thank you very much, Frank. I appreciate the time. Ryan, thank you so much as well.
All right. That is John Edwards, the 5th, and he is running for District 71 in Little Compton, Tiverton, as well as Portsmouth. And he will be on the Democratic primary ballot in those districts. So head on out before or on September 8th to vote. Frank, what else you got, my man?
Not a whole lot. I think that I was impressed with his candor in a lot of these different issues that he was able to talk about them, whether or not you agree with his approach. That's what this is all about. I really encourage people, if they're going to be, and I assume everybody who's of age is going to go out and vote, to go back and review these videos and look at the contrast between one candidate and another. This is an incredible forum to be able to do that. This is not the abbreviated form where people have a minute to answer a question. This gives the candidate an opportunity to raise whatever issues they would like, to demonstrate their own knowledge, their own approach to solutions. So I urge people to take advantage of it. And it's all up on the website.
It is all up on whatsupnewp.com, and we're making our way through the candidates. Our goal is to get as quick as possible to all of the candidates running locally in the in primaries. And tomorrow we will be joined by Terry Cortland, who represents District 72, which serves Middletown and Portsmouth. So yesterday we had 74. One of the two Democratic candidates for 74. Again, we've reached out to all candidates. They were all invited to come on as soon as they possibly can schedule around our schedule. Today we're in 71. Tomorrow we're in 72, and we'll keep going on, and we'll keep having candidates on, and keep the fun rolling, my friend.
We will. This is
if you are a candidate,
fun process.
It is. It's informative. It's a lot of work, but I'm learning. If people watch all of these, they're going to learn so much about how state is run. Whether you agree with a candidate or not, you're going to learn about some amazing ideas, as well as how the state and cities and towns are actually run. So,
absolutely.
All right, Mr. Prosnitz. Well, I think that's all we got for today, as of now. But something can always pop up, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. On behalf of Frank Prosnitz and myself, I want to thank John Edwards V for joining us today. Again, he is running for District 71, Portsmouth, Little Compton, and Tiverton. He is a Democratic candidate, and he is looking for your vote on September 8th in the primary. We will keep the conversations going, as I said, tomorrow, but they could always pop up. So stay tuned to whatsupnewp.com for the latest interviews. If you miss any video or interview or any moment of this video, you can watch it afterwards, and we post all of the videos there as well, so you can watch them live or afterward to compare and contrast candidates. That's going to do it for us now. We will chat with you next time. Again, for the latest, whatsupnewp.com.